Well, hello, Happy New Year. I'm here with Doug, and we're going to talk about effective accelerationism and other things. But first, you've got a story, Doug.
Yeah, so we made it to a new year. We're in 2024. That's good. So, what I'd like to do is talk about a couple of laws that have gone into effect. And first one is this is specifically California. Minimum wage is now increased from 15.50 to $16. Unless you work in a fast food restaurant, then it's $20 an hour, which is
That first
pretty
one sounds
interesting.
completely pointless. I mean,
50
1550,
cent raise?
why do you even bother?
Well, it's something, but if you want to know why your McDonald's meals are costing more, that's because the minimum wage is $4 more per hour.
I've heard people claim repeatedly that it doesn't affect the actual price of the food. I don't know how that works, but anyway,
We will see, won't we? 2024 will be the year to see.
maybe you will. I haven't eaten at McDonald's in a long time.
No, I have not either. I can't
Yeah,
stomach the food, but that's me personally.
yeah.
But apparently a lot of other people can. So we'll come back to another law that's changed. But Sam, what do you have for us today?
I've got the usual mass of AI stories. There's a ton of them. Um,
Hit
so,
me
Le-
up with one.
so Levi's is going
Uh-oh.
to use AI generated models to increase diversity. And so this is an interesting article. You can argue whether it's good or bad, but they want to have like all different kinds of people modeling the clothes. And rather than paying for a bunch of models to take photos, they're just going to use AI to generate fake people of all different ethnicity wearing the clothes. And so some people are freaking out saying this is unfair and it's not really employing models. But I don't know. It seems to me like there's a bunch of online websites that will like simulate what you would look like with this makeup or what you would like with this haircut or something. It seems to me like not necessarily a bad idea to AI
Well,
generate somebody that looks kind of like you in this clothes. You can make a better guess how you think it would look on you.
Sam, couldn't you just thinking about this,
Yeah.
couldn't you drop a cookie about your ethnicity, your sexual preference, ethnicity,
Yeah.
and you're cruising along YouTube, TikTok, whatever, ad pops up.
Yeah.
Based on that cookie, the AI is generated based on your preference.
That's more or less what they do now, except they don't use AI. They automatically pop up ads to design to appeal to you. I always get ads offering to teach me about hacking and stuff.
Yeah.
They read your Gmail and they figure out what you're doing and they advertise it. So I mean, anyway, then there's AI coding tools, but like Microsoft GitHub Copilot, and people have shown that it makes software more vulnerable. However, there's arguments that expert coders don't get much value from these, but bad coders, it moves them up to like C-level coders. Anyway, they say the result of these codes is pretty vulnerable, but what there should be very soon is a generation of AI driven vulnerability scanners that will fix code.
Yeah.
And then they should build that right into GitHub and other platforms where it automatically detects vulnerabilities and fixes it. So I think, within a year or two, we'll have really powerful assistants to help you with coding far more than the current thing, which is sort of like Clippy popping up saying, oh, maybe you want to change that to this. They ought to just have like you can turn on automatic cleanup mode that automatically removes all the known vulnerabilities from your code. And that would be a lot better, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's still early on in our AI adventure, if you will.
It is.
And again, the hackers, spammers are going to be ahead of us for a while, and we'll get caught up, and then the
Yeah, also I
playing
find
field, yeah,
yeah, I
playing
also find
field
that
will kind of be leveled a little bit.
bad guys are usually a lot slower to adopt new technology than people think they are too.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
They keep using
Especially
the old
especially when the
stuff.
old ways still work.
I know. Yeah, they're lazy like everybody else. Why
Yeah,
bother using new complicated
yeah,
technique when the old technique still works?
exactly.
So Michael Cohen has the honor, Trump's ex-fixer, of being the second guy that went to court with a bunch of fake references from AI. He said he'd been disbarred a while ago because of Trump. So he was preparing like an argument for his lawyer, and he just went on Google Bard and prepared it. And Google Bard just made up fake references, and his lawyer didn't check them and went to court with them. So the article I read said, it wasn't Cohen's responsibility to verify this. He's not a lawyer anymore. It was his lawyer's responsibility. But anyway, it makes him look like a fool. And I heard people say this is going to even lower his credibility more as a witness against Trump. The problem is there are so many documented cases of him doing things stupid and lying that he's not too valuable as a witness.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it,
So that's interesting, where this is going.
although I've
Um,
noticed that Google Bard no longer makes up fake references. I've asked it like medical questions like a month ago, and it no longer makes up fake references. It makes up references you can click and they're really there. Although I haven't tried
well,
legal briefs, but I think, and that, by the way, is not that hard to fix. A whole bunch of people have added ways to get rid of hallucinations, and all you do is you automatically generate like 3 different versions of the question and run it through the AI again, and you automatically verify the links with other things. So put another layer of AI on top of the first AI to clean off the hallucinations, and that decreases them.
I see. I
So, I
see.
mean, this is a problem that everyone is vigorously working on solving. That is probably the worst thing about AI is it will just tell you something completely wrong and demand that it's right and call you an idiot and everything else. And that's pretty bad. And they're trying to fix that.
Again, we'll see.
Yep.
Time is going to be the answer there.
And here's
So I
another
got
one.
one. I
Okay.
got another one for you. In
Okay. Go ahead.
California,
Yeah.
this is one that I think a lot of people are going to be really happy about.
Mhm.
That the hidden fees when you buy tickets, when you
This is
buy,
Biden's junk fees. Yeah.
yeah, the junk fees. Now, I know it's gone into effect in California, and it's my understanding, if you order something from another state from California, that the junk fee law applies. Let's get that focus in there. So in
Man.
other words, it's not only California, but it's also if you're doing business with a business in California.
Yeah. I know
I
Biden was
don't,
trying to run this as a campaign message. I don't think it's going to work. But anyway.
yeah, well, I tell you, I think a lot of people would be happy with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not that they can't add additional fees, it's that they have to notify you of the additional fees at the time of purchase.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of a lawsuit I was involved in years ago where you could lease a car, but if you
Yeah,
paid it off early, they would charge you a $200 early termination fee for paying early.
right.
And that's just the typical kind of bogus junk fee. I mean, what is that garbage?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've stayed at hotels where I've arrived. Like I've got Southwest used to have jackpot deals. And so you'd sign up through Southwest. I think you get the flight and the hotel as a bundle. I go to the hotel and they say, okay, you have to pay a resort fee. I said, "Wait, I already paid in full. I've
People
got a
pass,
receipt."
yeah,
Yeah,
people pass those taxes all the time. It's a way to make
yeah,
money like all the airport fees and everything. It's a way to make money for the town without taxing the natives.
yeah. And, by the way, the same thing is going on with Airbnb and VRBO, that hosts are publishing what their fees are, and then they'll tack on an additional cleaning fee,
Yeah.
or they'll add a key fee or something else, getting away. So a lot of people are really unhappy with Airbnb, VRBO.
Yep. Yep. Those are the junk fees.
Yep, more junk fees. Sam, you got another one for us.
I got a lot of them.
All
There's
right.
there's virtual influencers. This is another one I thought was pretty interesting. It's an article on Ars Technica. As you know, they're influencers are these young, beautiful people that talk about that or just get popular on YouTube or something or TikTok and then convince people to buy stuff. So they're now making completely fake ones that never existed, artificial characters, and a lot of people believe they're real and think they're making relationships with them and stuff. And some people are freaking out again, saying this is taking jobs away from real influencers. But I don't see how this is different than Tony the Tiger or Joe Camel. There have always been fake cartoonish characters to promote brands. Now they look like real people and seem to have personalities like real people. But I'm not sure I see this as a huge problem, but it's happening.
And
And then
so
there's
are
yeah,
these AI generated images
AI generated videos and
or
speech,
videos? Okay.
everything.
Okay.
So they appear to be real people, and they look like real people, and they're impossibly young and beautiful, and then they tell you to like buy this brand of hairspray or something, and people will buy it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, years ago, probably about 15 years ago, I remember coming across a newspaper article that said that Sony Pictures fires fake movie critic. So apparently for years or decades, they
Hmm.
had a fake movie critic that would write in LA Times or New York Times movie reviews of Sony Pictures that were always positive.
But it was a human writing it, right?
It was a human writing it,
Okay,
yes.
but they were not a real critic. Sure, it was just a way to covert advertising.
Right, right.
Right. That's a
Which
fairly
which is
common.
something that's been done for a long time.
Yeah, where they put in
But
advertising, but it pretends to be news. Yeah.
but this is interesting that hit the papers that the
Yeah.
fake one got fired without specifying who the fake one was, which means to me it was probably a pool.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, what else do you have for
Well,
us?
this is the one that I thought was the most important. A very nice article about the effective acceleration movement on Business Insider. Now, I've heard of effective altruism, which is the big thing that Elon Musk follows, where you imagine that you're saving future humans by moving them to Mars or something. And those future humans are as important as the humans around me now. So if I make my workers build more Tesla cars and make them get COVID by forcing them to go in during the pandemic, that is justified because if some of these current humans die, it doesn't really matter because more future humans will live because of this, because we'll get to Mars. So that's effective altruism. But effective accelerationism is so crazy that Elon Musk rebelled against it. And this is what popular at OpenAI, and this is that we shouldn't be bigoted in favor of human race or biological organisms. We should be happy and encourage developing super AI that will wipe us out and replace us and make the world, the universe better by having a superior race take over. And that's when Elon Musk said, wait a minute, I can't stand this crap. Um, that I didn't realize this is insane. It reminds me of this thing I often think about, Three Body Problem, a Chinese science fiction novel where these aliens are coming to kill us all. So a bunch of humans form an organization to help the aliens come kill us all. And I say, wait, nobody would do that, would they? Well, apparently they would. These are those people. They want to create robots that will wipe us out and replace us because that's proper evolution. But I guess you could say that. It seems like something we should logically try to avoid, though.
Yeah, I just came across, you remember the Twilight Zone with Rod Sterling?
Oh yeah.
They, I just kind of bumped into this reading an article, but there was an episode, and I believe it's one of the popular episodes, it's called The Shelter. And it was a family that was having a birthday celebration. And this is back in the 1950s, 1960s. And the town's doctor had spent a lot of time and money building a fallout shelter. And all the town's people ridiculed and laughed at him until during this birthday celebration, there's a warning that goes out that everybody should enter into the fallout shelter.
Hmm.
So he's the only one with the fallout shelter. He goes inside, but he only has enough food, water for his family. And
Hmm.
yet all the townspeople want to come in. And so it's the dynamics that occur between the doctor on the inside who prepared for the future, the townspeople on the outside, and then the arguments that develop between the townspeople on the outside of who should be allowed to go on the inside, should they be able to break in. And then at the end, it's sort of an ambiguous ending. The radio comes on and says that this was a mistake. And now you have the townspeople all left with what just happened, their feelings and the names and the arguments that they had with each other. Whereas an hour before, or at the beginning of the show, they were all friends, all happily celebrating.
Yeah, yeah. This my dad was a survivalist of sorts, talked about this sort of thing. That was really popular in like the 70s and 80s. A lot of people thought that there was going to be a nuclear war and you would have to like get a shotgun and protect your home from your neighbors trying to steal your stuff.
Well, do you remember? I remember in San Francisco all the signs for the fallout shelter this way,
I
like
don't-
Basement and Macy's, they had those civil defense signs.
Wow.
And I traveled in Eastern Europe in Belgrade, And I was in the equivalent of a Macy's department store there. And I remember seeing, again, I didn't speak the language, read the language, but the pictures, which were essentially pointing to the basement, but they had an American plane flying over with the bomb dropping. That's essentially the same thing. Run into the basement here
Well,
in case of nuclear attack.
well, if I suppose if everybody did that, then more of them would survive. The ones that were somewhat away from the main blast would, they're probably true.
Yeah. Well, my point is they were doing the same thing that we were doing over here.
Yeah, yeah. But except they had public shelters, so the idea was everyone could go there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I got
All
one
right.
the last one, last AI one. Then I'll go back to you.
Okay.
There's an article on Live Science about 3 scary breakthroughs, and these are what people are afraid of. And I thought it's interesting. The first one is Q star, artificial general intelligence, which I think is just science fiction, although there are rumors, not yet proven, that this is why Sam Altman was thrown out of OpenAI briefly, is because they did achieve artificial general intelligence and call it Q star, and it's so top secret they won't even tell us about it. I doubt that, but who knows? I think this is probably not going to happen in our lifetime, although I could be wrong. I didn't think we'd solve protein folding in my lifetime either, and we have. Probably the
Yeah.
biggest risk, most likely, is the one they say election rigging, hyper realistic deep fakes. I think that's already happening. That is so easy to do. There are probably going to be deep fakes fooling people, like Biden saying something outrageous, Trump saying something not outrageous, impossible things that would never happen. And then,
Well,
yeah,
it's essentially it's your Levi's ad, right?
yeah, yeah, but imitating real human
Yeah,
and making
but
it
imitating, yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah. And I
Right.
remember Putin even had a show a few months ago where they had him talking to an AI generated fake Putin as part of it. So, I mean, the technology is totally out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the one they put here as like the number 3 one is mainstream AI powered killer robots, which is the classic Terminator scare. And my first thought is that's insane. That would never happen. But no, it's already happening. I happen to know like 5 or 7 years ago, the military tried to have killer robots. They tried it like 3 times so far, even as of like 5 or 7 years ago. And every time they turned around and shot the wrong people. But there's a real market for this, of course. If you could send robots to fight instead of humans, there's a huge demand for that. Even if the robots are somewhat defective, it would still be enormously valuable. So that governments all around the world are working on this, and some of them are passing like agreements not to do this, but it seems inevitable. I mean, this is one of the things we've been promising since the 60s that we'll have robot soldiers and self-driving cars. They've been promising these since the 60s because both of those are so enormously beneficial. Tons of money will come your way to develop those products. Rather than sending our children in to die, we'll just send in robots. Everybody would rather do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Until you have a 15-year-old hack the robots from their basement.
Well, there's that, but even so, it
Yeah.
might very well, just like the self-driving car, it might be better than doing it with real soldiers.
True.
It's
True.
even if some amount of defects and flaws occur. So I think it's inevitable. And really, the technology is pretty much already there. We've got those General Dynamics dogs that walk around carrying things, and you could totally put a machine gun on that dog and put a AI looking at vision on the front and recognize the uniforms of the bad guys or something. It wouldn't require any advancement in technology at all to make a robot soldier.
Right. Right. And don't we have that with drones already?
The
With
drones
machine guns
are
or cannons?
currently remotely controlled by humans.
Right. Yeah.
But
Not
yes, they could just as well be run by an AI, the kind that drives a Tesla, and they probably would be
exactly.
right like 80 or 90% of the time, and maybe that would be acceptable.
Yeah.
I wonder how
Yeah.
accurate the humans are for that matter. There's an awful lot of cases like, the collateral murder from Julian Assange of the human controlled drones killing people they probably shouldn't have killed. So, and I don't know. I think this is going to happen. I think it's inevitable. If any
Oh,
of
I
us
think so
decide this
too.
is immoral and we won't do it, our enemies will just do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go
Yeah.
back to one of yours.
Yeah. So, new law that took effect in California. Police officers are no longer to ask you when they pull you over, do you know why I pulled you over?
Oh,
Which was essentially an admission of guilt.
I've never,
Because,
yeah, I've never had them ask me. I remember I got pulled over one time driving back
yeah,
from teaching at the college in Marin, and I asked the cop, I said, what? Did I do something wrong? Because I had no idea. and I was driving like 45 through a 25 zone, but I didn't see the sign. And he just wanted to know if I was drunk or something and let me off with a warning, but he didn't ask me. But maybe that's because I asked him first. I said,
Maybe, but it's a classic line that law enforcement, police officers have been taught. The first question that you ask is, do you know why I pulled you over?
"Mm,
And the reason for doing that is to get you to admit, oh, I ran a red light, or oh, I was speeding, which then effectively it's an admission of guilt. Now, if you talk to a lawyer, they would tell you to say, you don't know why you pulled me over in the past, meaning now you're putting the burden of proof onto the police officer, implying that they have poor memory because
well,
they
yeah.
don't know why they're doing it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, you have the right to remain silent too. You can,
Yeah, yeah, but if you're asked a question, most people would respond to a law enforcement officer
yeah.
with a truthful answer.
This reminds me of something that happened that I'm sure is routine. The FBI called me and they said, your name came up in one of our investigations. And there was like dead silence. What? They said, well, not in a bad way. I said, well, okay. Because somebody had hacked the college and
But see, if the FBI and just law enforcement in general, they can lie to you.
they can. And certainly starting off by sort of making you defensive and throwing you off balance is probably a good move.
Right, right.
Then why
So
they can't do that anymore? That violates what? What right does
so
that
in
violate?
California, new law, when you're pulled over, they have to tell you why they pulled you over, which
I've
makes sense.
yeah, I've heard that traffic stops are actually one of the most dangerous things for law enforcement.
Oh, sure. They
Because I mean,
certainly are.
sometimes that guy is like really on the run with a gun or the body in the trunk or something.
And we saw that happen with Polly Klaas, right?
I only vaguely remember that. What was that?
So Polly was in the trunk during
Oh,
a traffic stop.
uh,
And if he would have looked in the trunk, Polly Klaas would have been found. And I
uh,
believe she was still alive at that time.
and so the guy managed to act innocent enough to cause the cop not to get suspicious.
Correct.
Right. Well, that makes sense too. I mean, what's the cop going to do? They're not going to look in every trunk. They're just going to pull you
Exactly.
over and talk to you
And
for a few seconds and decide if you seem dangerous or not.
yeah, and I'll give you another one that got away. This was a very famous case, a little bit before my time, or maybe around when I was very young, was the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. from Lake Tahoe.
Wow.
So this took place in the late 60s. There was recently a podcast a couple of years ago that's actually pretty good called Snatching Sinatra. And maybe we should talk about that. But Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped from, I believe it was the Harrah's Hotel up in
Mm.
Lake Tahoe after performing one evening. So there was a snowstorm going on, and they took Frank Sinatra Jr., they put him in the car, and they made a high speed getaway in the snowstorm at 20 miles, 25 miles an hour, going down Highway 50 towards Los Angeles, where they had a safe house where they were going to keep him. And he was stopped. The person that committed the crime was stopped by the police at a roadblock. He passed through that. Frank Sinatra Jr. was on the floor under a blanket. And then, as he was about to drive away, a police sergeant came up, stopped him again, wanted to search, but the other police officer said, no, no, I've already searched it, and let him go. Now, the rest of the story is one that we should talk about in the future because it's so interesting. And it's one of those stories that's been forgotten in history, but it's such a bizarre story. And the ending is pretty incredible as well. But again, another story.
All
So,
right.
again, just quick recap. If you get pulled over, police in California need to tell you why you're being pulled over. And another law that was just passed into just went into effect is that police cannot pull you over for expired registration unless it's over 2 months now.
All right.
So if your car is expired and the tags have expired, then they're not supposed to pull you over right now.
All right.
So what we'll see. Again, expired registration was an excuse to pull people over.
Well, yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, probably for racial targeting.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Do you have another one for
Oh,
us?
yeah, I've got several more of these. So I was interested in this.
Yeah.
because I got involved. I used to be a research scientist, and there were some serious concerns about fraudulent papers, not in my work, but in really significant work at the time. And this has just been getting more and more well known that a lot of famous scientific work is fraudulent. And in fact, I've seen arguments that something like 1% of all scientific papers contain fraudulent data and should be retracted, and it's not even 1 in 1,000 that really get retracted. And so here's a guy who was the Stanford president, and for a decade, he's been defending his Alzheimer's research, which it turns out was completely fake and bogus. And he has been dragging his feet and trying to pretend it's okay and trying to admit only a small portion of it and then be forced to admit more and more of it. A whole series of papers come out. And this is a really important paper, cited like 800 times by other papers. I've seen this happen before. It happened to David Baltimore with a cancer paper. You have a really important finding, so important that it deflects an entire field of science to spend decades researching this treatment, which is completely useless because you started them in the wrong direction. And so it's really pretty horrible, but it's a thing to know. Um, he had
So,
some, yeah.
yeah, Sam, we should talk about this in maybe a future episode. But several years ago, and I'm talking maybe about 7 years ago, there
Mhm.
was a Harvard researcher by the name of Naomi, I think, Orkalis. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I might have heard this one. Go ahead.
She did some research, or maybe we should talk about it now. She did some research and she asked the question about climate change. Why are there so many people that are very esteemed scientists that are on extreme opposite ends of the spectrum of saying that there is climate change, there is not climate change? So she did some research on that. There's a book and there's a movie, and she came up with a movie that's called Sony Pictures Merchants of Doubt.
Hmm.
And the Merchants of Doubt, she realized, goes back in time to the time of the cigarette companies.
Right.
And the cigarette companies were being told that one day you're not going to be able to sell these these agents of death, if you will, or
Yeah.
premature death. And so the cigarette companies hired a law firm out of New York, or pardon me, out of Washington, D.C., and they also got together with a marketing firm and realized every day that they can cause doubt, confusion, and misinformation with politicians and the public, but more so with politicians, is another day that they could remain in business and sell their product, if you will.
Yeah.
And as we know, that was highly successful.
And I
That
think
that
it moved into politics with Steve Bannon and the other people.
and so what Naomi found after that is that if you start thinking about some of the other things between 1980s and roughly climate change, you'll find out that there was acid rain. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Right. So we had acid rain. There was a dispute over that. The ozone hole dispute over that.
Mhm.
Fire retardants used in furniture, kids' clothing, and there's a whole host of others. It turns out that the scientists that are some of these are Nobel Prize winners would take the opposition to cause the doubt and confusion.
Yep.
And it's the same thing. And she went so far as to find that they have a yearly convention where you can shop around and hire these scientists that takes place in Washington, D.C. It's a trade show.
Yeah. Yeah. This
And
reminds me of
yeah,
Washington, D.C. saying that for every expert, there's an equal and opposite expert.
or more with a large budget behind them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
It,
I think with climate change, it's interesting. You find the same doctors, meaning PhDs, that were talking about all these other topics in opposition.
yeah.
And some of these, so a couple of these, Fred Sanger is one who passed away maybe a few years ago. But he finally admitted after 20 years that, oh yeah, I knew that the research is bogus that we were putting out.
Yeah.
And he said, but I still don't believe it. And then finally, before he passed away, he admitted it.
Well, very few people would ever do that. But I think,
Yeah,
but I think this does represent a sort of fundamental weakness in our intellectual system, like a vulnerability for a virus. That
right.
carefully planned propaganda campaigns can, greatly influence public opinion, and it's very hard to prevent it. The best thing I've heard is this recent law saying they need to teach grade school kids media literacy and critical thinking. I think that's the missing skill. But when you have reputable scientists with major credentials that are lying, then even media literacy techniques won't save you. I mean,
Yeah, you're
heck, it
right.
really came from Stanford. It really came from real scientists. That's the sort of stuff you would do to decide whether to believe it.
Yeah, and what Naomi found was that this even went to Harvard,
Yeah,
and Harvard with the sugar industry accept a donation
yeah,
of, I believe, half a billion dollars to create a new wing or a new building. Harvard accepted it, and they came up with research to cause doubt and confusion about sugar causing additional weight gain
yeah,
and being a health problem in the future.
yeah. It's tough.
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I worked at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, there was research that was done there about Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi signals, specifically Wi-Fi, causing cancer.
Right. I've heard that all over the place. That never was proven, was it?
Well, yes, it was proven. It was proven that the data was completely fabricated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Not
It's not giving us cancer, right?
No,
Okay.
no. There's absolutely no credible proof, is the word that I'm going to use. There are
Right.
a lot of claims, but there's no credible proof. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but it's not credible evidence.
Yeah.
And not only was that paper retracted once, but that researcher, after receiving funds and finding that it did cause cancer, was able to release a second paper confirming the first paper.
Right. Right.
And now we know that it's completely bogus.
Yeah.
And the problem is, even though Lawrence Berkeley National Lab formally and the scientists formally retracted it, it's
Oh,
still used.
oh, sure. Once it's out there, like there was this
Once it's
one
out,
guy
yep,
like 40 years ago that said that vaccines caused autism, and that was totally debunked and withdrawn, but nobody ever cares. Everyone keeps citing that paper forever.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's another, likewise, there's another one that I just heard. There's been a lot of retail theft lately. And the retail theft, according to the merchants, and I forgot who it is, the advocacy group in Washington, claim that there's $25 million roughly, or pardon me, $25 billion in retail theft. And we're talking about employee theft, groups of individuals coming in, damaged merchandise, things like that. So that number was recently increased. And if you've listened to the news lately, you'll hear that it's either 52 or $54 billion. Now, where did that number one, double from? But it turned out that the person that's giving this information before Congress also gave the information to another group. I think it was a retail association where that number was doubled to 54 billion. So he cites his talk that he gave where he raised the value to 54 billion and cites that when he talks to Congress saying, this is my source. And it's a credible source, not saying that it's himself, but it's this Retail Merchants Association.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of this. Yeah. Yeah.
So, here we have these um, circular citations, if you will, that are completely bogus.
Yeah. Well, just like urban myths and conspiracy theories, the,
Yeah,
the intellectual community is vulnerable to these weaknesses.
exactly.
Yeah.
So do you have another AI story for us?
I'm done. No, I got
You're
two other
done.
stories, but not AI. Um, there's passwordless password managers out there now that just work on a biometric or one of those Microsoft authenticator tokens. And there's two of them. And this is Ed Bott, who I think is a very reputable writer. He tried two of
Yeah.
them, Dashlane and 1Password. And he said Dashlane works pretty well. 1Password is not really ready for prime time yet. But he said, I wouldn't adopt any of them yet because they haven't really standardized how to move it to a different service or a different device later or something. But this is probably the wave of the future, that your password manager will no longer have a master password. It will just use biometrics or something. And so I've noticed, by the way, my Microsoft accounts, I don't have to put in the password anymore. It just pops up something on my phone to let me in. And I didn't manually turn this on or anything, but it's happening.
So are you using Microsoft Authenticator on
Yeah,
your phone?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just quit asking me for passwords without me doing anything about this, which is fine with me.
Yeah, yeah. So the Microsoft Authenticator, if you're not familiar, is an app
Yeah,
for two-factor authentication. Sometimes it'll give you three numbers. You have to pick one of the three numbers.
right.
Other times, if you've got a, say, an iPhone, you can use your fingerprint biometrics or face
Yeah.
recognition and
But I
you're
had
in.
passwords on these accounts, but I don't have to use them anymore. I
No,
guess
you don't have to use them with the authenticator.
I appreciate that. I really have never loved passwords.
Nope, I haven't either, and they're a pain if you ask me, but
Yeah.
and plus we know that they're not that secure.
No, the only thing is they're the cheapest and easiest way to have some
Exactly.
degree of authentication. So they're always going to be around as the lowest common denominator of security. But more and more, everything's moving to two-factor, and they're making two-factor easier and easier.
Yeah, yeah, and that's going to be the secret. You don't need to make it more difficult for people to log in.
Yeah. All right. Why don't
All
we?
right, you
You
have
got one.
another story.
I do, but you got one you want to do right? If not,
No, no, let's hear
okay.
yours
Wait, this is
first.
my last one, which I thought was just good, clean fun. This guy decided that it would be better to tilt your monitor to 22 degrees so that you can see long lines on the long diagonal. He has a monitor that looks like about a 2-to-1 ratio. He tilted it to 22 degrees, and he wanted an operating system that can support projecting things at a 22-degree angle. And you can only do that with Linux. So he claims this is the most productive way to use your monitor. It makes an interesting picture of
Why, why didn't you just get a wide monitor?
he has a wide monitor and then he tilts it to 22 degrees to make it even wider and says,
Yeah,
"This is great. Now I can
yeah,
see the
but
long line." And
look, if you have a 4 foot wide monitor and you tilt it,
yeah, then
then
it's a
I
5 foot
don't.
wide monitor on the
Yeah,
diagonal.
then it's a
Now it's
yeah.
better.
Okay, okay,
That's what he does.
okay.
I don't think I don't think this is going to be too popular. He has a picture of you trying to read a web page this way, but I don't know. Remember the early TVs were round.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
maybe we're just this square thinking is just obsolete. Maybe we'll all tilt our monitors 22 degrees, but I don't know.
I remember when color TVs were coming out, there was a store that was selling for, I think, I don't know, a few dollars, a a piece of plastic that you would put in front of your TV that had different colors on it, like a rainbow. And they said, turn your black and white TV into a color TV.
Yeah, I
And I
remember.
guess technically it did.
Well, yeah, yeah. And if you had one scene with like green grass and blue sky above, it might look okay.
Unless the yellow was at the bottom and the green, you'd have yellow grass and green
Yeah,
sky.
yeah, yeah.
I
All right.
wonder how those sold.
You got another one, right?
Yeah, I got another one. This
Go
is
ahead.
an interesting one, and this one's not going to be resolved anytime soon, but not too long ago, California, our governor, uh, uh, Governor Newsom signed California Age Appropriate Design Code Act, or AADC, and that was passed in September of 2022. And what that was all about was age appropriateness, where people under the age of 18 would have to provide some kind of, or sorry, let me back up, that everyone would have to provide some form of identification to prove their age to access social media sites and adult content sites. So that was blocked in the courts, but that set the stage for several other states, Utah, Arkansas, I think New Jersey, Tennessee, to start looking at this and enacting their own laws. And I know in Utah, there was a Senate bill that had passed there.
Yeah.
I believe there was one in New Jersey as well. And I'm not really where this stands. I haven't been able to find a source on this, but this turns into a privacy issue.
Right.
And it now becomes flipped around. And like with all these bills, what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect children, right? Anytime you have a bill and you put protecting children in there, it's
Well,
difficult to defend.
that's why I put this link to Jonathan Haidt here. I mean, he's the
Yeah.
psychologist that has research claiming that the social media is greatly harming the children and you really should age gate it. So um, he's the latest generation of the guys that said video games are going to ruin our kids and smoking is going to ruin our kids and comic books are going to ruin our kids. Maybe he's
Oh,
right.
and
I don't know.
wait, and there's, let's not forget chewing gum. There
Right.
was reading books.
Right.
It was reading by electric light and not gaslight.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, there have been some societal changes, right? Like less religion and more divorce. So maybe you could say we did get ruined. I don't know. But anyway, he's
Well,
claiming
wait,
really should hate
let me
social
just
media.
let me just ask you, Sam, is he proclaiming that we should go back to scrolls?
No, he's
And then wait,
what he
if we go
does.
back,
No, his main
wait, if
evidence is that there is a huge leap in childhood suicide and self-harm that coincides with the popularity of smartphones and digital media. And the argument, which I must say sounds pretty plausible, is that young girls in particular go to like Instagram and they find out that all the other girls are prettier than them and richer than them and have more friends, and they feel miserable because they're losing in the competition. And if they compared them to like themselves to like the real girls around them, they would have a chance. But to compare to these perfect celebrities on social media makes them feel bad. Maybe that's true. That sounds pretty plausible to me.
I sort of doubt that. I think he may have a correct conclusion, but not his thought process is flawed.
Well, to
And
be
the
fair, I
reason,
don't think he makes that exact analysis. He just claims the
okay,
time correlation shows that it's social media, and he says it's really greatly increasing harm to our kids, and we should panic and immediately do something to protect our kids because this is a really large threat to them. And
and
maybe
and
that's true.
and it is true to a degree because we've seen suicides amongst males increase. And specifically, there was a South Carolina legislator whose son committed suicide.
Right.
And the reason he committed suicide was not because of social media per se, if you will, but it's because he posted, should I say, inappropriate pictures of himself.
Yeah.
And this was part of sextortion.
Yeah.
This used to attack girls, young girls, and they were the ones that were most vulnerable, especially by boyfriends. But now it's turned into we've got attackers from overseas. And there were 2 or 3 people that were extradited back to the United States for a Michigan suicide. It was a sextortion, and they're being put on trial. I don't know where that trial stands right now, but they were brought back to the United States. They were from Nigeria. And within a course of about 4 hours, the teen had sent, I think, 1,000 or several $1,000s, and then ultimately committed suicide.
Well, that might be the issue, which is that the normal, like hunting for a mate that used to happen face to face now happens online. And there are these scary predators, which are really like, middle-aged men and wouldn't be able to do it face to face. And so perhaps the increase in self-harm and suicide comes from the disasters caused by dangerous criminals that can fool you online.
Yeah, exactly. So these are people that are out to cause harm.
Yeah.
Specifically, they're after money. There's a money motive.
Yeah.
And these are part of the next generation, I think, of the love swindles that
Yeah.
have been going on for years
Yeah.
and continue to go on. Yeah.
So the problem is, how do you prove your age without ending internet anonymity? I know
Well,
in the
and
Brit
the other is, how do you admit your age without self-incrimination?
self-incrimination.
Yeah. So, in other words, what they'd like you to do is provide a driver's license, something like that, with
Right.
your birth date and picture.
Right.
But if I want to visit, and if I'm an adult, I'd have to provide that to show I'm over 18.
Yeah.
But that means that I need to provide that credential if I want to go, say, to an adult website.
Well, in
So,
Britain, what they proposed is there'll be like a national registry where you prove your age, and then they just ask the registry, has this guy proved his age?
yeah, we'll see.
Sort of like PayPal, right? Where you don't trust everybody your credit card number.
Yeah,
You can ask
yeah.
this trusted third party for the money.
So I've heard that Apple has already created such an app, and I'm not sure where this is, but you can load your driver's license in. And if you go to, say, a bar, instead of providing your driver's license to the bouncer at the door, who can see your name and address, where you live,
Mhm.
things like that, with the app, you can specify what information to give, such as picture and maybe first name only, and to verify not the specific birth date, but to specify that you're over a specific age.
Yeah.
So that might be one solution. I'm sure we'll find issues with that.
Well, but if you have a smartphone, it has your credit card number and your birthday and everything. So logically, there could be a smartphone app to authenticate your age, and it would be pretty reliable. I mean, you have to give your credit card number to run your iPhone and stuff.
Yeah, but how do we take care of the picture ID, and how do we not swap somebody else's picture or use an AI picture? Or sorry, not a picture, but to alter the information
Well,
that's on the driver's license. Like, how do you prevent a fake driver's license from being uploaded?
you could require people to authenticate with their smartphone, just
Yes,
like they do, and then you could require that the owner of that smartphone is over 21. And then
but I
that
got a
would,
fake, but I'm under 18. I get a fake driver's license from Canada or someplace else.
and you
Why
register
couldn't I
with your
upload?
smart.
Why couldn't I upload that into my burner phone?
Well, you could if you could afford to
Oh,
get a burner phone and make a fake ID. But I mean, every system is going to have some ability to fake it. But I think that most people would not have the ability to do that. Most children wouldn't have the ability to get a smartphone and also a fake ID and all that. So it would
you
probably have the
you
effect of making 90% of the kids not able to get in.
you don't think you don't think a lot of college students under 18
Oh,
or
well,
under the age of 21 are getting fake driver's license?
I suppose they are, but I mean, you know, I think the people you're really trying to reach are the ones under 13. That's the main group you're targeting. And I think not very many of them can really
No, no, I would
card
agree.
or
I
something.
would agree.
And that's
Yeah.
I think the main group that people are worried about is preteens, really.
Yeah. So they just use their brother's
Well, there's
credentials.
that. And I don't know how you can do anything about that.
No, I don't
Unless
think
you
so
force
either.
a biometric authentication to get in, I guess that would do it. But
Or, but still, then how do you know who's in the room
right,
viewing the images?
right.
So,
Well, yeah, you can't do anything about that. But I mean,
yeah.
you could have some limit. Anyway, it's yeah, I know. And I think in the UK, they've been trying to enforce this for several years, and I think they finally abandoned it, figuring out there is no way to make that trusted third-party broker that has everybody's age. But I don't know. It seems like you could tie it to the smartphone, but maybe there's something wrong with that. I just had that idea, but I don't know if that's really a good idea.
Yeah, but again, this could be used for adults to track them. If they're visiting adult websites or maybe medical websites, something.
Well, it wouldn't
Um,
track them if it was like you said, if it only provided the information that you are over 21 and nothing else, then it wouldn't be
but
tracking connecting you.
but as we know, there are apps and there are covert ways of tracking people,
Well, there's that.
cookies, things like that. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true. You're right. But that's
So,
already happening, of course.
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. But we're taking this to another level where if, say, one of these states like Texas wants to find everybody who's finding information about abortions
Well,
or
yeah.
finding information about adult websites.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah. And
So
yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. 2024, we've got new laws that are going into effect, a lot of arguments that are going to be taking place about these new laws that have gone into effect, and we'll see where we are a year from
It's a brave new world.
now. Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this one. And I'll have another one on Friday.
All right. So, Sam,
Yeah.
you stop. Oh.
Not stopping now.